Double check it is recording. Alrighty. So for those of you who have checked out the recording, does it work out okay? I mean, the voice is okay. It does get, faint when I walk away from the mic. Is it still audible? Okay. So it just changes once in a while. Okay. I have been experimenting using a Bluetooth headset, so I can actually just carry it with me, so that way, it would not, change the volume, when I walk away from the mic. But I still haven't gotten it to work yet, so that's still kind of in the works. Yes.
So if I wanted to get knoppix for my external space it takes?
You don't need knoppix, because I have my own distribution that can do exactly the same thing.
Okay.
So that's what I've been talking about from the first class, so you might want to catch up with that one.
Well, no, because the reason why I asked is that
knoppix may not be the best option because knoppix doesn't come with the Android emulator that you need in order to run the app. So if you want to do it not using the emulator, knoppix will work okay.
Okay, I was talking about your distribution that in case I wanted to have my external, how much space would it take?
It will take about, give me an 8 gig thumb drive, that should work. But an external hard drive works better.
Okay, so you want me to give it to you during the break then?
Yes, you can do it during the break, and yeah. Okay, so a few things. Let's start up the browser first. So have you guys spent any time to think about what app you want to do as a project for this class? Okay, so most of you have. Okay, good. Because the first homework assignment, or the second homework assignment I should say, is already up and running. I have changed the due date, so it's not 2014 September or sometime. Okay, instead it is this Thursday. So it doesn't give you a whole lot of time, but it's not really a whole lot of work either. I don't need a whole lot of specific details. I just need to know what you think that you want to do for the rest of this semester as a project. Okay, so let me just kind of go there first. This is all stuff from last time, from last week actually. So here we go. Just to show you how to get to the YouTube channel, just one more demonstration of how to get there is youtube.com/someprofs. Okay, which is also the same thing that I wrote on the whiteboard. Okay, so this is not anything new. Press the Enter key, and once you get here, just go to videos, the videos tab. It will show all the video recording of different classes, not just the classes that I'm teaching, also cisp362 and a few other classes are also uploaded here. So what you need to do is to kind of browse through this, look for cisp363, and the date of the class.
362.
362, sorry. And so you just basically look back in time. If it is further back in time, you can just click load more, and that will go back even more. Okay, but right now I think the first page should cover it because we only have been in session for a week and a half. So I don't think you need to load more at this point of time just yet. Each one is about 1 hour and 20 minutes. It's a whole full lecture. So one thing that might be helpful for you guys is, during class, if I start to talk about a particular concept, just write down on a piece of paper, okay, your notebook or whatever, and mark the time. So this way it will help you locate that particular topic in the video really quickly. You don't have to watch the entire thing through again. But YouTube already has a lot of nice features. You can just hover over the timeline, and it will show you, like a little window to show you, okay, this is, a frame from that particular time frame. So that can help you locate, what you need to find as well. But keeping your own index, is going to be very helpful. Or at least, that's what one of my students have said. This particular student had taken one of my classes like, twice or 3 times. And then the third time he said, okay, now I think I know how to, utilize the resources, available, because this is not usual for other classes to have a class recording. Alrighty, so getting back to this class, I want to show you your homework assignment first, so I can show you, where to find your homework assignment and what it is about. This is CISP 362, and have to sign in. I forgot to sign in first. All right. So the homework assignment Perfect Start is already past due, okay? And the one that is due on Thursday is called Project Proposal 1. It is right after Omelette, which is something that we talked about last time. Yes?
That says it's due the 10th of February.
Yeah.
Sorry?
That's
says
next
it's due
Wednesday.
February
Project
10th.
Proposal 1 is due 1 week from this Wednesday.
1 week from this Wednesday.
Yeah, it says February 10th.
Okay, well, we'll just keep that date. Not a problem. Gives you guys a little bit more time to think about what you want to do. I don't want you guys to think you have more time to procrastinate. Okay? Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
So spend more time to think about what you want to do and then read the instructions carefully. Because of that extra week that I did not intend, okay, which is okay, not a problem. I will have to make sure that when you turn this in, you are doing it the way it's supposed to, okay? So let me just kind of go over this a little bit so that you know what I'm expecting out of this homework. I will, let me just change the size of the monitor first because you can't really quite read the bottom part, can we? Some of us, you know, especially people sitting in the back cannot read the bottom part. Okay, is that okay for people in the back? Okay. Which is, you know, this is one of the things about the projector setting of these classrooms is just not, you know, set up, you know, in the right location, you know, yeah. All right, so we'll go ahead and talk about the homework assignment. Present a project proposal for this class, and it is going to be an Android app using App Inventor. At this point, focus on the user's perspective. So I'm just gonna, you know, expand on this sentence. It's basically what I'm writing, you know, right after this, you know, question, right after this statement, but I'm just going to talk about it a little bit. So you want to look at this from the user's perspective, not looking at it from the developer's perspective, okay? So if you're developing a black box, okay, to do a certain thing, okay, we are looking at it from the outside of the black box and say, okay, what does this box do to the end user, okay? How is it of any value? Why would someone want to install your app? Okay, so think about it from that perspective. So think about the marketing aspect first, okay? So let's say you're trying to get rich from selling this app. Now the question is, why would anyone spend $2 to download and install your app? $20 or whatever, okay? That is what you need to think about first. Why do you think that is important?
There's no point doing it otherwise.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, if you focus on how to get something done, then you're looking at, you know, all the tools, you know, the nails, the screws, you know, the bolts, you know, the tools, you know, like the saw and the drills and stuff like that. And you're thinking, okay, what am I going to make out of these things, right? Well, that may be a fun project if you're learning how to make use of those tools, but if you are a contractor, you're not going to make any money. You won't have any clients because you're just saying, okay, I know how to use these things. Okay, so you need to sell first, okay? You need to think about what you are selling. So think about how your app is going to be useful to an end user. What is the value of your app? Okay, now entertainment by itself is a value as well. Okay, you know, if someone downloads your app and it is fun and is worth, you know, the money that that person is spending, then it's still a value. Okay, so the value part is important. You want to think about, you know, how many classes of users or how many classifications of users is related to your app. Most apps only have one, you know, classification, which is the usual end user. But you might have an app that requires multiple users. Okay? Well, for instance, if you want to make an app, I'm thinking about this because of my own children, that does the planner, okay? So it's an electronic planner for elementary or middle school students. Then you might have multiple classifications of users because the student is one classification, okay, the kid or the child who is entering all the homework assignments, the tests and whatnot. But you might have the teacher as another classification of users who can kind of like double check, okay? Okay, you know, this, yes, you did, you know, write down the correct things. And then you have a parent as another classification, because the parent at the end of the day can check off the items and go, okay, I can see that you have done this homework, check. You have let me know, what you got from the previous exam, check, and so on. So with that particular app, you have 3 classifications of users. And it is important at this stage to identify that as well, because we are going to draw UML use case diagrams. Why should an end user install your app? Okay, well, with the Planner app, the answer is, what do you think? Nobody has a kid or a relative or a cousin who cannot keep up with the Planner, obviously, because you guys cannot think of a value. Well, this is to help a child to develop a habit to use a Planner in an efficient way, and also for a parent to help kind of track the child's homework and stuff like that, to kind of help the child succeed. So the objective of this app can be just that, okay, to help the child succeed by making a better use of the Planner. Okay. At this point, it is too early to explain how the app works, so you want to focus on just how someone may use the app. So the key word here is use, okay, not how it is done. Any questions about what you need to do at this point, what you should be thinking about at this point? Now, if you want to think ahead of time and say, oh, I'm already thinking about features, that is not a problem. But that's not what this homework assignment is asking. This homework assignment is just asking, why would someone want to download and install your app? I want you to document in 2 ways. The first way to document this is to use UMLET, U-M-L-E-T. You have to draw the actors. Remember, each actor is representing an entire classification of users, not a particular user. So parent is a classification. Teachers is a classification. Student is a classification in the app that I just talked about. Okay. And each actor has to connect to at least one use case, okay? And some use cases may involve multiple actors. Your use case diagram should also consist of at least one actor and at least 2 use cases. Okay, so think of 2 reasons or 2 ways to use your app. What you need to turn in, okay, submit the following. Use the built-in text editor to type a description of your proposed project. So your description is just, using sentences, okay? Just describe what your app is going to be about, okay? Particularly focus on why someone may want to download your app, because that one is not really captured by a use case diagram. A use case diagram can document how someone is going to use your app, which is great, okay? But what you want to describe using the text editor area is even a higher level, which is, okay, why would someone want to download your app? How the app is going to be used is still one level lower compared to the overall objective of your app. Like in my example, okay, for the Planner app, the objective is to help a child, organize school-related, work. Okay, that's basically what the objective is. But the use cases will consist of the child entering, putting entries into the Planner, right? The teacher checking the Planner, and then the parent checking off the Planner. Okay, those are the 3 uses, or 3 main uses of this particular thing. Oh, but what about deleting old entries? That's not a use case, okay? It is not why someone is downloading and installing your app. Nobody's going to download your app or a Planner app just to say, oh, I want to delete an entry. That doesn't make sense. Okay? It is one of the supporting features, but it's not a use case. Is that okay? I mean, does everybody kind of understand what a use case is? It's pretty high level. Just focus on, why am I starting the app on a phone? Yep.
Just wanted to ask, is there any particular version of UMLET that you would recommend us downloading or using?
I would just go to the website and use their current version, whatever stable version they have.
Okay.
So I have a tab here that is already on the website. So we'll just go ahead and Okay, this is the full website. Last time I think I got a little bit confused of which one to actually download. So we go down because it has all kinds of ads, and a lot of times it would download the advertisement apps. So I think this is where you're downloading it. So you click on download at this link here, and it will open up a new page. And over here there are ads as well. So this is an ad, this is an ad, and what you need to do is to go here. So if you click on Omelet 14.1.1 standalone, that will do it. So that will give you a zip file, and then what you need to do is to unzip the file. Okay. Any questions about this part? You do need Java to get this to run, so you do have to have Java installed on your computer. Okay. Any other questions? Other questions? All right. What if you're using my thumb drive approach? It will work, okay, because my thumb drive already has Java installed. Okay, so what you need to do is to unzip it and then use Java to start it up. Yep, go ahead.
So I'm thinking about making a simple game to help my help a kid with their math.
Okay.
So it doesn't seem like I'm going to have many users, but I could see a parent wanting to try it out, see if it's going to be effective.
You can also have a parent or a classification of parents, right, to review the progress.
Oh, okay.
So the parent is not going to sign in to play the game, but rather the parent will sign in to kind of look at the scores, and also the activities, like how many times the child has been playing this game, and how has the score been changing over time. So that would be a perfect use case that is separated from the child actually playing the game itself.
Okay. But now if I end up going with just a simple time waster game.
Okay.
Can you think of any other use cases besides just goofing off, just playing the game, just entertainment?
Just entertainment. Well, that's a tough one. For most games, I think there really is only one use case, which is to entertain.
Yeah.
The only other thing is you can also, if you have any connectivity, through the web, you can also, make it so they can, communicate with a friend or somebody else, so you can compare your scores. Okay, you can basically collaborate or something like that.
Or if it's like a smoke screen for me to collect user data and then sell to a third party. That's a good use case.
That's a use case. Yeah, you definitely then have a cloaked user or actor.
I like it.
Yeah. So you can add a hood to the matchstick figure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or a mask, in the case of anonymous, just get an anonymous mask and put it over
Guy
that.
Fawkes mask.
Yeah. All right. So, are there any questions about how to get Omelet? No questions? Everybody know how to get that? Okay. So before I get distracted any further, I am going to start to program these thumb drives with the image of the whole thing. So I'm gonna put this one here. So as I'm doing this, I just want to kind of mention what you need to do when you do something like that. And especially for those who are interested, because this is something that it's not something that everybody needs to do. Okay, the first thing is I need to know what drive this is. This is SDC. It's the third drive attached to the system. And then in Linux, it's relatively easy to do this because I can just go ahead and use a dd command. One single command can do it. So let me scroll this up a little bit so people in the back can see it. Okay, so dd if is deblive.img, which is the image file to overwrite the entire drive. The output is SDC, which is the entire drive. So I want to make sure whoever gave me a drive earlier to reprogram, nothing on the drive needs to be saved. Is that correct? For those of you who gave me a drive earlier. Yes? Okay. Because that's kind of the deal is, you know, I cannot keep any content on the drive with this process. Okay? And in Linux, it's really just this simple to, you know, reprogram the drive, you know, so that you can do exactly what I do in class. So this is the starting of one drive. I'll do the other one later on. And getting back to the last year. So are there any questions about using Omelette? Okay, no questions about using Omelette? Well, you guys have 1 week and a half to do it. So my suggestion is to get on it as early as possible. So if you encounter any problems with the concepts or with the tools, you can bring those questions back on Wednesday. Then I can explain that, and then you will still have a whole week to do it. Okay, so the whole point is to get started on this one early. All right. So, any questions about this particular homework? No questions? Okay. I'm hoping that this is actually kind of fun for you guys because you're basically documenting something that you want to do. Okay. This is not my app. This is your app. It is your project. All right. So with this out of the way, last time I explained what a variable is. So this time what we'll do is we'll move forward in the notes, okay? Because we are basically, you know, continuing on multiple fronts. One front is, you know, how do you plan to write an app? The other one is basically, you know, how do we use the user interface? So all of these notes here, okay, this is in the topic labeled basic user interface. So all of these topics here, I type it here, I put it onto Moodle for a reason. For what reason do I put it onto Moodle? For you guys to read, exactly, okay? But this is somewhat supplemental because, you know, when you go to the App Inventor interface, there are, you know, those question mark bubbles. You can actually click on those and they will give you an explanation of what that thing is as well. And if you click on the link to the full document, it will give you examples of how to make use of it. So make use of all those, you know, resources as well. For those of you who are really, really into social media, YouTube and stuff like that, go to YouTube and just, you know, type App Inventor here. Has anyone tried this? No? Okay, well, let's go ahead and see what happens. Okay, so I'm just typing App Inventor in YouTube and click search. And we'll find out, you know, what we'll see. We have introduction, you know, look at the number of views. Now some of these are kind of old and dated because, you know, you can just look at the date. But you can see that there are many links here. Okay, create animation with image sequences, tutorial, and so on. The only thing is they are not really particularly organized. Okay, but you can still see a lot of resources online. Okay, and if you have time, you can go ahead and watch some of these extra stuff just from YouTube. How many people watch YouTube to learn how to do something or has done that? Exactly. Okay, and App Inventor is well used by different people, and a lot of people have already made a tutorial or, you know, how-to videos online. So you might find, you know, something that I do not explain well in class, but somebody else actually has done it and has, you know, has already explained that, you know, really in really good details. Okay. All right. So with that kind of out of the way, so we'll continue with our stuff. So let's go ahead. Static screen out layout. Okay. So the question. So what this is about is you're designing the layout of your screen. Now this is maybe your app, maybe not your app. I'm using the dashboard of a car as an example. Okay. Which is actually not irrelevant anymore. Okay, when I wrote this, okay, there were very few cars, if any, that has a flexible dashboard design. Okay, when you think about the dashboard of a car, okay, what do you think of? Speedometer, odometer, fuel gauge, those, you know, what they call it, dummy indicator lights, because by the time you see it light up, it's already too late. Okay, What about the newer cars? But dashboards tend to be very static, right? Here is the speedometer. Here is my, parking brake indicator, and so on. What do you think is the new trend?
Minimalism. Minimalism.
Minimalism. So you use the minimal. What about flexibility? Think about, okay, when you think about the word Tesla, what do you think about?
Computer screen.
Okay, most people think of cars, right? Well, some people think of the actual person Tesla, but these days it's about cars. What I think about when I think about the word Tesla, it's a mobile device. Yes, it is a rather big mobile device and it's rather expensive, but it is a mobile device because it is run by computers and it has a very programmable user interface. Okay, and that's what we are now doing with dashboards. We are replacing individual display elements, the dials, the needles, and whatnot, with a screen. Okay, here's the next question. Do you think that's more expensive or less expensive compared to the physical dials, the physical gauge, the physical needles, and whatnot?
More.
They used to be more. It's no longer the case. Because when you assemble a car, think about when you assemble a car. How many people have seen a mechanic taking apart a dashboard? Okay, you guys, okay. With a conventional dashboard, how many wires, cables, and whatnot is attached to the back of the dashboard? A lot, right? What if you need to change one of those things? Yeah, exactly. And what if that odometer cable is kind of getting old and the cable itself is starting to detach? Now you have to run a new cable, right? How many people want to do that? It's no fun, okay? It's definitely not a fun job. Now think about the alternative. What if the entire dashboard is one mobile device? Okay, it's just a screen, right? So you take out the dashboard, you take out the plastic housing and stuff like that. Okay, there's one single panel with one single plug. Now there may be multiple connectors on that plug, right? But there's one plug, one panel. You detach that. And if it's broken, or if you need to change it out for other reasons, you put in another one in, replug it back, put it back in, fasten it, put the cover back on, you're done. And from the perspective of assembly, this is far less expensive compared to there's one cable attached to the speedometer, there's one cable attached to the tachometer, there's another cable attached to the fuel gauge, there's another cable attached to each one of the dummy lights or the dummy indicators, oil pressure and whatnot, temperature, that sort of thing. So it's not, what I'm writing here is no longer just an example. People actually are doing that now because it's less expensive. Manufacturers don't do things because it's fashionable. A lot of times, the changes are because of cost. Is that making any sense? Okay. Okay? All right. So, but this is, I'm just using that as an example. So the first thing you need to think about is the screen. Okay, so what is the big deal of the screen? So what we'll do is we are going to take a look at the screen, okay, which is not going to be a whole lot of excitement because a screen is a screen. I mean, it's not really that big of a deal. This is the part where it gets a little bit difficult because you guys can only see the 2/3 of the screen, and I can't really do it very easily like this. Yep.
You could make the main window a little bit taller. You can still see a little bit of
A little more?
Yeah.
Oh, wrong screen. Okay, let me try this one. Is that okay?
Keep going, keep going. Yep. There you go.
Okay. So it's a little bit better. Okay, so I'm gonna name this application test screen because that's the whole idea. It's just to check out, okay, what is the screen and what can we do with the screen. All right, the screen, which is this part here, is the overall container of everything that you want to present to the user. Okay, that's the overall container. So the first thing when you're designing an app, okay, and you are done with the use cases and stuff like that, you're actually going to implement the app. The first thing you need to do is not really to put in things on the screen. Now, it's actually pretty easy to put things on the screen, okay, but you do want to need to know, what things are available to put on the screen, and how can I arrange those things. Okay, those are very good things to explore. So you can see all of these various things. Okay, you can have a button, you can have check boxes, you can have a date picker, which doesn't really show what it is, but basically what it does is it allows you to specify the year, the month, and the day of month for a particular date. Same thing for a time picker. It's just that it's for picking a time. These are really helpful because you can basically people cannot make mistakes. They cannot specify day 32 of a particular month because the interface limits what people can actually select. You can put an image. Okay, now it doesn't really show what it is because you actually do need to have an image in order for the image to appear as a picture. A list picker is basically kind of like a drop-down box. You click it, it gives you a full screen to allow you to select one item. So these are the things that you can use. If you don't need these things anymore, you can just go ahead and select it and click delete. So that allows you to delete things that you have already put into your app in case you don't need it. Okay, so that's good. But what if you think you need a few items and you need those to be like right next to each other? Because the way you do it now is everything is below the item that you have already selected. You can choose and move things around so you can, but it will still be vertical alignment. So what if you need a few things that are side by side? Yep, you need a container that let you say, okay, I want to arrange items side by side. And those would be in the layout portion. So when you click layout, it gives you some different tools. But these are not interactive. Horizontal arrangement, table arrangement, and vertical arrangement are not interactive elements. People do not interact with these things. But rather, they are basically a grid or just a way for you guys to arrange your items. I'll pick one, horizontal arrangement. So I'm just going to pick and put it here. It doesn't look like much. But one thing you might want to do is to look at the properties. So when you look at the properties of a horizontal arrangement, it gives you alignment horizontal. Okay, how do you want to arrange items horizontally, and how do you want to arrange items vertically? Those are not really particularly useful until you have put items into this kind of container. So once you have a horizontal arrangement or table arrangement or vertical arrangement, by itself, the arrangement itself doesn't do anything. Okay, it's just a little box. But when you start to put things into it, then it starts to make sense. Okay, then you can start to see, oh, okay, so this is what it does. Let's go ahead, let me just go back to user interface, and I'll just put a button and an image into it. So I put a button here and put an image into it as well. So when you put an image into it, you can see that now these two items are arranged horizontally, not vertically anymore. Okay, and you can put additional things. You just have to keep an eye on how much space you have. When you change the size of one, it will change the size of the overall container. So if this is not displaying just text for button one, let me change the caption on the button itself. So I'll just say start, okay? And the moment I change it to start, you can see the entire horizontal arrangement changes in size because it's using the minimum space needed in order to store the items that are in this particular thing. The second thing you can also do is to nest these things. In other words, you can have a horizontal arrangement inside a vertical arrangement, inside another horizontal arrangement. So that gives you a lot of options of how to arrange the user interface elements that you want to use in your app. Is that okay? I mean, does everybody understand, how the arrangement, quote unquote arrangement items, how they work and what they're useful for. They're also useful for one other thing. Now you're starting to group items into one whole thing. So you can do certain things to the entire collection, to the entire group, instead of individual items. So let me go back to the horizontal arrangement. So one way to select the entire arrangement is go to Components instead of Viewer and click the arrangement itself. And you can see the arrangement itself has a visibility control, which is here. Okay, for those people in the back, it says visible. Okay, where the mouse cursor is, it says visible. So that controls the visibility of the entire arrangement. Every single item in the arrangement can now be hidden if I uncheck the visibility box. Now, why would that be useful? Because if something is not visible, it doesn't take up any space on the screen anymore. So you can kind of emulate the effect of having multiple screens without actually using multiple screens. You can control which arrangement is actually visible to emulate the effect of having multiple screens. Is that kind of doing okay so far? Okay. All right. Let's do an experiment. Okay, so let me just kind of write a very simple experiment, a little app that allows me to switch between three screens without actually using multiple screens. Okay, using multiple screens is possible with App Inventor, but to debug an application like that is a little bit more cumbersome. Okay, so it can be done. So right now I'm going to show you how to use arrangements to emulate the effect of having multiple screens. Okay, all right. So I already have one here. So what I'll do is I am going to, let me see, what would be the best way to do it? Oh, this is the best way to do it. I'm going to use a list picker. Okay? So I'll put a list picker outside of any arrangement. So this will be my selector to select, okay, which screen do I want to see, which is the visible screen. Okay? I'm going to change the text on the list picker. And so we'll go ahead and change that to arrangement selector. Okay, so this allows me to select which particular arrangement I want to look at. So this is one, and we can also put a picture, an actual picture into the image here, or I can just get rid of it. So we'll just go ahead and delete this, and I will go ahead and create another arrangement, and this time we'll go for a table arrangement. Okay. Now this table arrangement is not a part of the horizontal arrangement. So with the horizontal arrangement, it is this guy here. Now, what is a table? How does it compare to a horizontal arrangement? What do you guys think?
It would have rows and columns.
Rows and columns, exactly. So horizontal is kind of like a single row, but you cannot have multiple rows. You have one single row, and you can only put items next to each other sideways. But with a table, you can arrange both. Okay. All right. So with the table arrangement, I can now go back to user interface. Drag and drop a button here. Okay. And I can go to label, which is really just text, and put it either next to it or below it. Do you guys see how I can make it more just diagonal? Because it is a table. You have rows and columns. What if I need a third row? What if I'm going to put a slider onto the third row? It doesn't. Okay, this is still on the second row. There are ways to. Let me go back to this one here. You can control the number of rows and control the number of columns as attributes or properties of the container. Okay, so right now the default is only 2 by 2. What if you need more things? Well, just change it. So if I need to have one more row, I can change the row number to 3. So now I have an extra row, and I can now drag the slider onto the third row instead of the second one. Here's another question. What if this is kind of what I want to do, but what if I want a slider to be wider to have the entire width of this container? What trick can I use to do that? So I do want my button, the first button of this container, to be here, I want the text label to be diagonal all the way over here. Don't ask me why, this is just the way I want it to look like, okay? But I want the slider to be of the entire width of this container. How can I do that?
Can we have a horizontal?
Yes, you can. So the thing is, you can nest. You can actually nest one type of arrangement inside another arrangement. Okay, so let me show you guys how to do that, okay? So if that is what I want, I'm gonna move this one out first, okay? Change this container back to 2 by 2, okay, because I don't need the third row in this container anymore. Then I go back to arrangements, layout, and I will pick out a vertical arrangement this time. So in the vertical arrangement, the first thing in the vertical arrangement is my table. And then the second thing in the vertical arrangement is my slider. So I put a slider all the way down here. It still doesn't show correctly on the screen, but when I actually run this app, it will actually show correctly. So that's kind of a trick because it does allow you to put one arrangement inside another, and there's no restriction of oh, I can only put a table arrangement in a vertical, or put a horizontal in a table. Nope, there's no particular rule of saying what type of arrangement can be inside what other type of arrangement. Now, when you're inside an arrangement, you can also select the item and go to the width control of that one. So instead of using automatic, you can make it fill parent. So that will force a particular element to use up the entire width of whatever is containing it. So in this case, the container of this slider, the little green box here, is no longer the overall screen, it is the vertical arrangement. But the vertical arrangement needs to be at least this wide because of the table arrangement that is embedded inside the vertical arrangement. Is that okay so far? So being able to do this type of nested arrangement gives you a lot of flexibility of how to place items. Is that okay? All right. So this is my second arrangement, and I'll go for a third one. So the third one is going to be I'll make it a vertical arrangement as well, but it's outside of the other two. And this one, I don't really need it to be too fancy because that's not the point of this particular thing. I just put a text box here and maybe a button down here. Okay, here we go. So it has a text box and a button. So now I have three arrangements. The first one is a horizontal arrangement. The default name is horizontal arrangement 1, vertical arrangement 1, and vertical arrangement 2. So those are the three arrangements. The way it is right now is when I run the app, it will show all three arrangements because the default visibility flag is on all the time. And this would be a good time to start up the app. And this is also a good reminder of how to start up the emulator if that is what you want to do. Oh, okay, so one is done. So whose drive is that? Okay, wait, hold on a second here because let me see what is the size of this thing. 32 gig. Do you want to use the entire thing for this class? Okay, so I will go ahead and resize the partition. Okay, so I'm sorry that I'm interrupting the content of this class a little bit because I want to finish this and so that he can get started with this. This is a gpartEd, or it is a partition editor. It's really useful for more than just this class because what you can do is you can select a particular drive and you just make resize partitions. So in this case, I'm resizing the partition called persistence. So this way it uses up all the available space. And I'll let it do whatever it's supposed to do and then get back to that a little bit later. Okay, so getting back to my application here. So I want to start up the emulator. If you guys don't remember how to start up the emulator, this is how we do it. In Linux, at least. So in Linux, there's no icon to double click. You really just have to type the entire path, which is under User, Google, App Inventor, and then inside that you have commands for App Inventor, and then you just say AI starter. Okay. Press the enter key. If you see this message, which is listening on http://127.0.0.1 blah blah blah, you're fine. Okay, that's what you're supposed to see. Then you can switch back to the browser, switch back to App Inventor, click Connect, and then click Emulator. And what happens here is this particular thing, when you click Start Emulator, the JavaScript running behind the web browser is making an HTTP request to the AI starter program. The AI starter program starts a miniature web server, and it is responding to the JavaScript making a request to it. And it interprets what the request is, and by making different requests, it can do different things to the emulator. So it's a really tricky way to convince a web page, which is App Inventor, to use a tool that is pre-installed on the computer. It is all done by HTTP requests. So for those of you who are interested in the underlying mechanism of these things, that's basically what is happening behind the scenes. But if you're not interested, that's okay. You don't need to know that in order to use App Inventor. You just need to know the steps of how to get this to work. Right, so now we have the app loaded, and it should display in right now. Okay, there we go. So we can actually see the three things. The first one is this part here. Okay, the start button is its own horizontal arrangement. So you can click it. It doesn't do anything because there's no code corresponding to it. Text for button 2, this label here, and also the slider. These three items belong to the second arrangement, which has its own nested arrangement inside. And then the third one is the text box. You can actually type in the text box. It doesn't do a single thing because we do not have any code corresponding to this entire app. And then here's another button. So the user interface is done, but there's no code. That's why it's not doing a single thing. The one thing that we have, yeah, go ahead.
Just want to make sure maybe I missed it. How did you lengthen the slider for your emulator? Because whenever I open up my emulator, it's just this little slider bar.
You have to control the width. So I make the width of this one same as the parent, same as the containing parent. So you can either make it the same, or you can customize the actual width. But if you don't specify a width and there's no value associated with it, it will just give you like, just a token little thing. All right, so the one thing that we haven't really tried is a list selector. And this is a list selector. It doesn't seem to do anything because I haven't given it any options yet. Okay, so that's one thing that we have to do. But overall speaking, the elements are here. Okay, so the next thing we need to do, that I need to do, is to associate just a little bit of code to the first element here, to the first user interface element, so that we can actually control which one we want to display. So now I switch back to the App Inventor screen, and out of the three, I have to make one the default one, the one that is actually being displayed by default. So what I do is I look at the other two and say, okay, you are by default not visible. And this one is also by default not visible. And this is the nice thing about having the arrangement is if you turn the arrangement itself invisible, all the contained elements will become invisible as well. Okay, so it's a handy way to say, oh, turn off all of these things because they're all inside a particular arrangement. Okay. The second thing I need to do is to go to this one and say, well, okay, what are the items in this one? Elements from string allows you to specify what items you are allowed to select inside this thing here. Now, what if you don't know exactly how to use one? What is the next step? You go to the list picker, because this is a list picker here. The name implies it is a list picker. You go to list picker, you click on the question mark. It shows you, briefly how to use one. So I'll just read it out here because people in the back may not be able to read it. A button that, when clicked on, displays a list of text for the user to choose among. The texts can be specified through the designer or blocks editor, which means you can hard code it in the designer view, or you can go to the blocks and actually have it programmed in using a logic to program those things in. By setting the elements from string property to the string separated concatenation. So you basically specify the choices using commas to separate the individual choices. All right, so that gives me enough information already. But if you need to know more, you can click on more information. It will bring you to an entire web page just for this topic. I'll just do it once here, just so you can see what it is. So it shows you this is a list picker. It gives you the entire list of all the properties, okay, and full explanation of what you can do with it as well, and all the events related to this one. But I'm not going to do this. I just need to go to the blocks here because I want to give you a quick demonstration of what we're doing. Oh, I forgot one thing. I'm going to specify what 3 items we can specify here. Okay, so we'll specify arrangement 1 is my first item, comma. Arrangement 2, okay, I said arrangement, but I only type arrange. Arrangement 1, arrangement 2, and arrangement 3. Okay, now obviously in an actual application, you want to better describe what the arrangements are about, but in this case, I just need to differentiate between the first, the second, and the third. Okay. But this doesn't do anything because if I go back to the emulator, it mirrors what we have on the screen of the design screen. And if I click this, it shows me the various options. But it doesn't matter which one I click, it doesn't do a single thing because there's nothing responding to the event of clicking an item inside the list picker. Are there any questions so far about what we have done so far? No? Okay. So what I need to do next is to specify an event handler to say, oh, if somebody clicks anything within this list picker, this is what we need to do. Okay? All right. So let's go to the blocks editor here. And the first thing we need to do is to say, oh, but which item, the event of which item are we trying to handle? Can someone answer the question? The list picker, exactly, okay? And by the way, this is called object-oriented programming. You might have heard of that term, OOP, or object-oriented programming. We are doing object-oriented programming. Because when we think about what we need to do here to specify the logic, what we think about first is not what we are doing, is not the action, but the object, okay? Which object are we trying to interact with? That's the first thing we try to answer, and that's why it's called object-oriented programming instead of procedural programming. Because when you're doing procedural programming, which is the old and kind of boring way of doing things, is you think of what you're doing, the action itself. Object-oriented programming make you think about to which object am I doing this to, okay? What am I interacting with? You think about the object first. Then you say, oh, object blah, blah, blah. Can you do this for me? And that's why it's called object-oriented programming. So a lot of people think, App Inventor is so simple of a thing that it doesn't really promote or, let people understand what object-oriented programming is about. That is actually not true. Okay? With almost every event-driven type of programming, it is object-oriented. Okay. So let's go ahead and go to list picker. Okay, so we pick the object first. This is object-oriented programming. Now we say, well, out of these events related to a list picker, what am I going to do first? Okay, what is going to be the event that I'm going to specify? Okay, so if you look at this, these are all of the events that can be driven, that you can handle. Touch up, touch down, lost focus, got focus. Before picking and after picking. I'm going to say after picking because if you hover your mouse pointer over, it would actually explain the event itself. So right now it says after picking is the event to be raised after the picker activity returns its result to the properties have been filled in. After somebody has selected an item. Okay? Okay, but if that is after picking, what is before picking? Right? After picking is after someone actually touches and say, okay, this is what I want. What about before picking? When do you think the before picking event happens?
Maybe it gives something that you, or before you are able to pick, you have to do something else. So you are basically setting it up. Right.
Yep.
Prerequisites.
It gives you a chance to set it up. Okay, so let me just go back to the emulator to show you how to use a list picker, and you guys can then tell me when the first event, the before picking, is going to happen. To use a list picker, you click the list picker first, then you click again to specify which one you want. So when do you think the event before picking happens?
Right at the screen switch?
The first click.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, the first click, which is now, okay, this is before clicking. So the before clicking event gives you a last chance to change the options based on what the program is doing right at that point. Okay, because when you handle the before clicking event, you still have a chance to change what options it will be presenting in the next screen. Is that okay? All right. The second event, which is after picking, is when you click a particular option. This is after picking. So if I click arrangement 3, this is after clicking. Is that okay? All right. So now we go back to the blocks editor here. Now we know for sure that we want to use after picking. So once you pick an event handler, it just gives you a kind of empty box because you have to fill in the details. Okay. So what do we want to do after picking? Well, we want to use whatever the user has picked to control which arrangement remains visible. The other two has to turn off. Is that okay? But how do we know which one is actually picked? Well, those are properties of a list picker. So once again, we are relying on object-oriented programming because we are not thinking about the procedure first. We're thinking about, okay, so which object, who has the information that I need to determine which arrangement I should remain visible on the screen. And obviously that information lies in list picker itself. So you can use this to browse through. Okay, we're not using an event handler anymore. Instead, now we are using a property of list picker so that we can say, oh, based on this particular property, now I can decide which arrangement to remain to be visible. You can look at all of these things, just kind of figure out which one we actually want to use. I don't think we are enabling or disabling the list picker itself. We're not changing the font to italic or boldface or changing the size. So we keep going. You can associate an image with the list picker just like with a button. That's not what we're doing. We're not changing the background color. Okay, now we are starting to get more. Okay, so maybe it's this one. Well, if you think it may be this one, right there. Okay, so just hover over it, and the pop-up box the pop-up help will show you what it is, or briefly describe what it is. The selected item, okay, I'm just reading out what is in the box here. When directly changed by the programmer, the selection index property is also changed to the first item in the list picker with the given value. If the value does not appear, selection index will be set to 0. This is the actual text string, the text value of the selection itself. So in our particular application, it's going to be arrangement space 1, okay, arrangement space 2, and arrangement space 3. Those are the text value of the selection, which is useful, but it's not the best way to do it, because then you will be comparing a string to a string. Okay, it is tedious. Okay, because now you have to specify this string has to be equal to that string. If you have a little typo, they're not going to be, it won't match, right? And if you want to make your program multilingual, okay, if you want to support multiple languages, embedding text everywhere makes it very difficult to translate your application. Okay, so that may not be the best thing we want to do. What about this guy here? It still has selection in it, but it says selection index. Okay, so I'm just reading out what is in the box here. The index of the currently selected item, the index of, okay, which is the number associated with the item. Okay? Starting at 1, Now this is important. Starting at 1 or starting at 0 makes a huge difference. For those of you who have, and I know who you are, for those of you who have taken C or C++ programming, your tendency is to think it starts with 0 because that's what C and C++ do, okay? And most other programming languages as well. But in this case, it starts with 1, okay? The first item in the list is marked as 1 if you want to use a number for that item. I will continue to read this. If no item is selected, the value will be 0. If an attempt is made to set this to a number less than 1 or greater than the number of items in the list picker, the selection index will be set to 0. That's not what we are doing. We are not changing it. We are reading it so that we know which one is being selected. Is that okay? So we know that we have to make use of this, okay? But we're not really quite sure whether that is what we want to do or not. Okay, so here's the next question. I'm writing this app here. I'm suspecting this is what I need to use, but I'm not 100% sure. What do I do? What is the quick and dirty way to figure out, yes, this thing does have what I want? Try it by using a dummy debug label somewhere. Then you can just set the label to this thing. Then you can see whether this value is what you think it should be. Okay? So that's what I'll do first, okay, is to test it a little bit by using what I call a debug text label. So a label is just a label. It doesn't really do anything. It doesn't interact. All it can do is to display something. So in this case, this label 2 doesn't do a single thing. It is not supposed to be in the application. I'm just using it for testing purposes. Okay? So when I'm done testing, I want to get rid of it because it doesn't really do anything. But once I have this label, I can go back to the blocks and make use of that label. Because inside this event handler, I'm not going to change the visibility of my arrangement blocks, but instead, I'm going to label 2. And I'm going to label 2 and say set the label 2's property text here to the selection index of list picker 1. It is object-oriented programming because the first thing we say is, oh, what am I doing? Well, no, not what I'm doing. What am I doing this to? I'm trying to change the text of label 1. So you think about label 1 first, and that is object-oriented programming. What do I want to change it to? I want to change it to something that list picker 1 has, which is the selection index. So once again, that is object-oriented programming. You think about who is doing it, who is interacting with the user, or who has the information. You think about who first. Then you think about what. What action do I want this thing to do? What information do I want to get from it? What property do I want to change of that thing? That's object-oriented programming. Okay? So that's the program at this point. When I switch back to the emulator, the program is already changed. So in this case, I go to Arrangement Selector, and I select the second one. Now, before I click this, we kind of have to think ahead of time and say, well, based on our understanding of the program at this point, what is the text, what is the label going to change to? What is going to be the new text of the label? What do you guys think? This is what I'm going to click. I click Arrangement 2. It should be updated to a value of 2, okay? Just the numeric value 2. Does that make any sense? Okay, so this is important as well. When you're testing a feature, you kind of have to think ahead of your own program and say, I think this is what it is supposed to do. Okay. If it doesn't do what you think it should be doing, that's okay too, because it simply means that there's a miscommunication somewhere, and it is important to figure out what it is so that you say, oh, okay, so I guess that's not what they meant when they go say blah, blah, blah. And what do we see? We see 2, okay, which is kind of what we expected. If you want to test it a little more, we can click on 3, and it changes to 3. When we click on Arrangement 1, it changes to 1. So now we have a fairly good confidence. We have confidence that the property selection index is going to be 1, 2, or 3 as we make a selection in the list picker. which means now we can start to use that information to make a decision and say, okay, we want to turn off these two arrangements and turn on that one. Okay, let's go ahead and figure out how to do that. So going back to the block editor here, I can leave this one as it is. Okay, it doesn't really interfere with anything except it updates a box that should eventually be gone. Okay, but other than that, it can stay here. Every time you think of something that has multiple branches, what type of block should we be using? In other words, in this case, there's one single execution thread coming in. But depending on the choice that we have made using the list picker, sometimes we want to only let the first arrangement be visible. Sometimes we want the second one to be visible. Sometimes we want the third one to be visible. And it's all based on the selection index of list picker 1. So what type of block should we be thinking about in this case?
If else.
If else, it's called a conditional block or a branch block or just an if block. Okay, so you can call that block, with multiple names. And right now, we have to choose from the built-in blocks because that is not specific to a particular object. It is just control. So I just said control, which is the proper one. Okay. So when you look at control, you have all of these different blocks. You have if then, which seems to be what we want. Okay, that sounds good. For each, no, that's not what we want. For each again, while if then else, okay. Do result, evaluate, but ignore result. And then we have a whole bunch more down here. Close screen, those cannot be what we want to do. So what do you think? There are two really likely candidates here. The first one is if then else. And the second one is almost the same thing except it's if then. Well, in this case, we can try it out. Just drag it out and see what we can do with it. Okay? So that's one thing about programming, especially in an environment like this, is you don't have to really think that carefully before you kind of drag it out and see what you can do with it. Okay? Because that's exploration. So I'm going to pick this one first. Just put it in here. If I don't need it, I can always throw it away. Well, but this only gives me one branch because it basically says if a certain condition is true, then we do something. Well, if it's not true, there's nothing that we need to do. Okay? But there's a little blue box here, or the blue thingy here, and when you click it, it says, oh, it does give you some really kind of cool options. So what this little box is presenting you is to say, hey, you can expand this box to do more. You can expand it to specify else if. You can also expand it to specify else. Okay? So I'm just going to drag these things into the block here, and then I'll explain what they do. So I drag two of these things in, and one of the last thing, which is the else. Okay? So when we're all done here, we'll go ahead and click outside. So now we have, how many branches do we have? How many alternative ways to proceed do we have at this point? There are 4 ways. Okay, there are 4 ways to proceed. Because one way to proceed is right here. Next one is here, next one is here, and this is the last one. So we do have 4 branches right now. But we only got 3 options. How can we have 4 things here? To catch errors. Okay, just in case we have some kind of error, we want to be able to catch it. Okay. All right. These little notches here, the smaller notches, they are for specifying conditions. In other words, each branch is associated with a particular condition. And the conditions are evaluated from top to bottom. Okay, they're always evaluated from top to bottom. The first one that is true will trigger the action or the branch below it. Okay. All right. So we want to do something about this first. So let's just say we are going to associate this branch with having arrangement 1 being selected. So now we have to go back to think about object-oriented programming. We go to arrangement 1 and go to its visibility control and say set it to visible. Okay. So when you have this block here, just hover over it, it says specify whether the component should be visible on the screen. Value is true if the component is showing and false if hidden. So what do you think this last notch should be connected to, this little notch here? To true, okay. But how do we get a block that says true? Which one of these do you think it belongs to? Control, logic, math, text, lists, color, variables, or procedures?
Logic.
Logic. So you go to logic. Here we have true. You just stash it here. Okay? But when you turn on one arrangement, remember we only want one arrangement to be on at any time. It means you have to turn off the other two. So now we have to basically replicate this block. This is the shortcut to do it. So I'm going to duplicate this block, stash it here, duplicate one more time, and stash it here. Because you can actually use the drop-down box. Oh, I cannot. Darn it. Okay, I thought I can just change the which arrangement I'm dealing with. We have to toss those away because now we have the vertical arrangement, visibility, and then we have the last one, which is also a vertical arrangement. Change its own visibility down here. And this one we can actually replicate, right-click, duplicate, put it here, because this one I can actually, from true, false, I can select which one I want to use, duplicate, put it here. What condition should I specify here? Now we know the one factor that I can use to determine which one I'm actually selecting is what? We display that in the text box in the label already. What was I using? It's still on the screen right here. It's the selection index of list picker 1. Okay? But right now, I'm not just using it. I know this is important, so I'm going to duplicate and say, okay, we know that this is a part of the whole thing, but I know I cannot just plug it here to make it work. This is not going to work because you can see that it won't even click. It won't click because selection index is an integer. It is 0, 1, 2, or 3 in this case. And what the other notch is specifying with this notch here wants something that is either true or false. 0, 1, 2, 3 does not match true, false. Okay? And for those of you who know C and C++ programming, it's not the same thing as C and C++ programming. Okay. So how can I turn this into a true, false value? I'm starting with an integer, but I want to end up with true. But only when selection index is 1. What do I use? I can compare. Very good. Okay. So we need a block to do compare. But where do you think it belongs when I want to compare? Comparing is a what type of operation? Logic. Well, it is logic, but I think it belongs in the math category here. So if you go to the math category, it has compare here. I can see why you think it should be logic, because it is Boolean, and everything Boolean, sometimes people will put it into the logic, but in this case, because we're comparing numerical value, they put it under math. But I can understand why it can go either way. Yeah. Okay, so we know the first thing we're comparing is the selection index, so it goes to the first place. What is the second thing we're comparing it to? How about just a constant of 1, right? So that's math here. We select the constant, just a single number, change that number to 1. That's basically what it is. Okay, so now that we have a basic blueprint of how to specify a condition, let's duplicate it, okay, and stash it here. Because this is the second condition. If the first condition fails, okay, if it evaluates to false, we're going to evaluate the second condition, which is this one here. We don't want to compare to 1 anymore. We can compare to 3, we compare to 2, but let's just go sequential, okay? So if it is 2, then we are going to do about the same thing as what we are doing here for this entire block. Okay, so I'm going to do some duplication here. With 2 exceptions. 2 things are we need to make changes here. because this time the selection is 2, which means we want to turn off the first arrangement, turn on the second arrangement, the third one will still be off. Is that making any sense? Is that okay? All right. Okay, so we're almost done here. We duplicate this condition again, duplicate, stash it here as the condition of the third branch, and then we'll also duplicate each one of these actions here. So we say this, we say that, and we also copy that. The first one needs to be false, the second one needs to be false, the third one is the only one that should be true here. Okay. Looks like we got everything that we need to do. Let's go ahead and test it out a little.
Change the selection index to 3.
Oh, that's right. I forgot to change it to 3. So based on the code here, what do you think is going to be the bug? Okay, when you test this program, when do you think it will show up and go like, hey, this is not what it's supposed to do?
This 2 has 2 different options.
So, which means nobody is handling 3. So you can switch between the first and the second arrangement, but when you select the third one, it's not going to do a single thing about it. Okay? Well, let's test the buggy behavior first, because that's, once again, that's what we think it should be doing, but is it actually doing it? Let's go ahead and test the program. Even though we know it is buggy, we want to see if the symptom of the bug is what we expect it to be. Okay? So switching back to here, we select arrangement 1. Okay, that's arrangement 1. We select arrangement 2. That's arrangement 2. Now let's see if it has a bug. When we select arrangement 3, it doesn't do a single thing. It doesn't do a single thing. This is still arrangement 2 that is being displayed, but the label gets updated to 3 because it is outside of the conditional statement. It is done prior to the conditional statement. That's why it's always updated to the correct value. Okay, very good. Okay, so now we can go back and say, oh, okay, that was a bug. We forgot to handle number 3, and now number 3 should turn on. Oh, wait, hold on a second here. I want to explain something else. Okay, let's go back to the buggy version of this code and say, but if I have 2 blocks, matching, because they're both comparing to 2, how come it's only going to make arrangement 2 visible and not arrangement 3? Because if you think about it, this condition is true because it's comparing to 2. This condition is true as well because it's also comparing to 2. But how come we're only seeing arrangement 2 being turned on? We never see arrangement 3 being turned on.
It doesn't make it to it.
Because of the order. Exactly. It doesn't make it to it because of the order. When we evaluate the conditions, it's always from top to bottom. And once you have one match, once you find a condition that is true, you stop evaluating the other ones. You only pick one of the multiple choices. That is why. Okay. So from this example, which was not intended, okay, the bug was not intended, we actually start to see several things about programming logic. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually fix this up to a 3. Okay, there we go. And we go make sure that it is into the program. So now when we select arrangement 3, this is arrangement 3 with a text box. So everything seems to be good. Oh, but what about this last branch here? Okay, this last branch here, it seems like we don't need it. Okay, but this is a catch-all thing, which means if all the other conditions fail, this is what it's going to execute. Okay, we still want a block like here, because if I decide to change the program to have additional blocks, additional arrangements, and I forget to change a few things, it falls down to here, it means, hey, the program is wrong. It should never get here. Okay? So instead of using the proper way of handling an error, which I'll talk about in some other classes, the only thing I'm going to do here is to set the text of the label, using it as a debugging means, right, to something that says, you can always just say that we are not supposed to be here, but it is helpful to specify more, right? So you can specify a list picker 1 choice is not handled. Because that's the only reason why we are here, is the branching doesn't catch all of the possible selections. Is that okay? All right. And of course, the way it is now, we will never get here because we do handle all of the cases. But it's easy to test to see if I can catch this one. Because the only thing I need to do to see if I can catch the so-called mistake here is to go back to the designer, go to the list picker, and instead of only having 3 options here, pick a 4th one. Just specify a 4th arrangement or an error condition. Okay, I'm putting the error condition here just to see if the logic can catch it. Okay, so going back to my emulator, now I have 4 possible choices. But out of the 4 possible choices, I only have logic to handle the first 3. The last one, which is the value of 4, will go to the else, not else if, of the conditional statement, which means the label will now display a list picker choice is not handled. But this is the kind of thing that we have to think about is, what if I make a mistake somewhere in the program? Can I make this application catch some of those mistakes? You cannot catch everything, but whenever possible, you can have code to help catch mistakes in your own application. Are we still doing okay so far with this? How many people know what is a conditional statement prior to today's class? So this is all kind of like old stuff, okay? And if you do not have any experience with conditional statements before, well, this is what you do, okay? You can specify when this is true, do this. When this is true, do this. When this is true, do this. And it gives your program a choice, okay? It gives it the ability to make a decision. Okay, so we'll go ahead and take a 10-minute break, and when we come back, it's going to be more or less free form. So you guys can start to work on your omelet homework assignment. Think about your project. We can talk about it. If you have an idea, you want me to kind of evaluate your idea, it's a good time to do it. If you want me to program a flash drive so that you can use the same environment that I use in class, you can give me a flash drive and I can start to program those things too. Are there any questions before I stop the recording? It's okay? All right. So I'm stopping the recorder now, and let's have a 10-minute break, and then we can come back and continue with the other stuff.